and welcome, Exiles, to the conclusion of my Gauntlet run. Unfortunately, it didn't end with me killing Ubers, which was my ultimate goal. It ended with this clip, and I'll play it real quick, and then we'll get a rundown into the character, why I died, what I did wrong, and what the whole build plan was. Focus up, don't get distracted too hard. Drowning orbs are very bad. Where is my mana? That was a very bad time to not have mana. You gotta be kidding me, man. Out of mana and I can't Immortal Call. Okay, so what happened there is I set up my character with one very fatal flaw, which is my mana sustain wasn't great. It was pretty dependent on me leeching the enemy, and a lot of times sometimes I would miss shoot my Lancing Steel spraying, and I would target maybe Elder when he was immune, or I'd be trying to target Shaper when he was immune and I wouldn't be leeching. Like, I think right here, I think I phased the Shaper. I think you can actually see it happen. So Shaper's the one I'm supposed to be damaging, right? I'm leeching mana from him. I phase him. I don't realize it. He goes into me not being able to leech mana from him right then. I stop being able to leech mana, and my new targetable person I can actually leech mana from is over here. And that was my sustain method. And unfortunately, what that meant is, in the timetable of him starting his slam, when I went to press Immortal Call, when I see him do this slam, I can press Immortal Call pretty much instantly, and my Immortal Call lasts for 2.5 seconds. I have a huge window where I will not die, and I'll showcase this later in a little bit. The problem was, right when I went to press Immortal Call, I had just cast the skill. You can see it go dark. That's probably right when I went to cast it, and it didn't go because I was out of mana. I just used my ability. My Immortal Call actually costs more mana than I really realized it cost. I didn't think I would have an issue like this. And the first time it happened was literally in the clip. And that's when I should have logged out and said, okay, I need to figure out my mana. I need to solve this situation. Because it's actually not that hard to solve, or at least I believe it's not that hard to solve. I haven't tested this in game, but I think I have an idea in my head where I could fix the mana actually quite easily. But anyways, you'll see at the start of this clip, I get hit with an initial slam where I almost die. The good news is the first time I was standing still and I was next to him. So I had Flesh and Stone and Arctic Armor, versus the second time he hit me, I walked away from him and I was in the middle of walking, thus I was not stationary. Very big misplay on my end. So you'll see this first slam here. I stand still. I tank it fine. I still have 6k ES to go. He only hit me for 2/3 of my ES. Who knows? Maybe his second slam crit me or whatever. Point is, if I have the DR up, there's a much, much, much better chance I survive. And unfortunately for me, I just was really not thinking straight when I got hit by those attacks. I should have logged here and went and figured out my mana, and I did it. So TLDR is I need to be a lot more careful in the future with how I play my mana. This character, the way I have it built, should be able to tank literally everything in this fight except for Shaper's slam. Technically, I shouldn't be tanking the Shaper beam either, but that's like, I have a decent amount of time to just dash out of it. That's not a big deal either. It's really just a matter of, if he goes for a slam, I press Immortal Call. That's really the only thing I need to think about. Other than that, I just walk in circles and press my ability. Walk in circle, press my ability, and I should be able to do this fight very consistently. Unfortunately for me, I did not really fully think through the fact that sometimes I might be out of mana with my current setup. If, for example, my target changes, no longer is damageable, and thus no longer can be leeched for mana, and, you know, one thing leads to another, and that was the shortcoming of the character. Unfortunately, we did not make it to clear Ubers. We got all the way through everything feared, everything but Ubers. The hardest Ubers for me to do were going to be Uber Elder and probably Maven. Uber Elder having just one of the mechanics that could actually kill me, being that slam. And then technically, I think I can die on Exarch if I stand on a Great, get the minus max, and then I get hit by Annihilation. But I might be able to survive Annihilation if I'm not on the max Great, even if I tank it, I think, because I have Spell Block and I have Recovery as on block. Well, let's get into that. So, the character, I'm just going to showcase right here, is we're about 20k ES on Trickster. We have Spell Block, Spell Suppress, Ghost Dance. We have pretty good leech, pretty good regen. That's our sustain mechanics. Then we have, you know, things like evasion and then high max res. The whole shebang of easy defensive layers that gets included in the trickster archetype when you go and you invest into a high-end character. And I want to showcase, first of all, just a clip of what it looks like to have spell block, in terms of it's just complete shotgun protection. When you put spell block onto the character and you add in a recover on block shield, you can get hit by just a bunch of things all at once, and you just don't really sustain damage, and it allows you to tank that just from the recover from the block. Not to mention we also have recover from leech and the other things as well. But that's the reasoning behind why we're doing spell block, is this sort of stuff. And let's go ahead and just go into in-game and talk about the character a little bit and what's going on here. So if you've been watching the Gauntlet at all, you know that the winner has been Ben. Of course, once again, he pulls off a big W. He was also playing a trickster, and I got a lot of questions about what I was doing with my character versus what he was doing with his character, and I'm going to go through them. So basically what ended up happening is everybody who was playing trickster, for the most part, copied what Ben was doing, and I was happy with that because I thought Ben's character has a lot higher chance of dying. Newsflash, I died, so it's a little bit awkward. But the things Ben did, and I'll go over the main differences, the things I got questions about real quick, is number one is 4 flasks. Why was Ben using 4 flasks? Why were we using 3 flasks? This is pretty simple. Opportunity costs, you need to, in order to sustain 4 flasks with Balbala, you need basically belt suffixes like reduce flash charges used, flash charges gained, flash duration, and you need a flask gain on your chest. So that's a decent amount of opportunity cost. The upside is you get an additional flask, so you can do things like the worm flask for fortify, or you could do like your Quicksilver while mapping, stuff like that, where there's a nice upside, with the downside being extra investment in that sort of stuff. Now, for me personally, I didn't think the Quicksilver was something that would have been necessary to help me that much in surviving these fights. Movement speed is useful in a lot of boss fights. For some things it is, some things it isn't. Really, a lot of times when you're dodging, you kind of need to just be doing flame dash or shield charge, not necessarily just Quicksilver walking out of it. It's not usually fast enough for a lot of these mechanics. Now, he didn't use Quicksilver either. He was using it for Fortify. What he would do is he'd proc the Worm Flask, he would use a Vigilant Strike on the Worms, and he would get Fortify. So this is a 20 DR benefit with these downsides where you have to spend either passive points on the tree or have good belt flask suffixes, as well as the flask implicit on body armor. This is a great upside. I think this is very much worth it if you are good with the playstyle. For me specifically, I thought, no way, no how am I going to manage that Fortify consistently and play the fight well. It's just another thing you have to pay attention to that would draw me away from paying attention to the mechanics in the fight. Like, for example, Shaper Slam. I don't Immortal Call there. Say I proc Fortify. There's still a solid chance I just die to that. Whereas if I am paying enough attention, I proc Immortal Call, I 100% survive every single time. And so, in my mind, I'd rather be able to focus more on the fight and playing it correctly than having to think about worms. Ben is a very good player. This is absolutely the correct play if you can manage to do this Fortify. But for me personally, it was not worth it because I didn't think I would mentally be able to focus on the fight enough if I was thinking about doing the worms, where I would get the 20 DR, but then I would do something stupid that would make me take more damage than the DR is protecting me from, if that makes sense. Next up, right side tree versus left side tree. The upside of right side tree is you get access to point blank and you get access to some easier spell suppress nodes. So for example, Ben's pathing, he went down here and he went through the spell suppress nodes, grabbed point blank or grabbed precise technique, and then he got point blank. This is great in terms of if you, it's easier to cap your suppress without having suppress on your gear. For example, my character, I had to craft suppress on my shield and suppress on my body armor, which lost me the ability to craft percent intelligence. It lost me, or percent attribute, lost me the ability to craft some other useful things, like for example, DR. I think I could craft a small DR, Fizz DR on the shield, which maybe would have helped with the Shaper Slam, stuff like that. So you still have to spend the points on the suppress, and on left side tree, technically I could reach out to instinct as well if I wanted to, but that's some of the upsides. Is you get to go down here, you get access to point blank, it's better DPS scaling. Personally, I am not a fan of, I'm not really a fan of this. I don't think it's, I have a hard time feeling like this is worth it unless you have a Resolute Technique, Ephemeral Edge, and you can start doing like some weird stuff with your pathing in terms of like a, oh, what's the word? Split personality, some weird stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of this. The reason I went left side instead is you get better ES scaling. Int is very important for ES scaling, and you're spending 10 dex nodes versus spending 10 int nodes going this way, which is, you know, 20% increased energy shield from that. You also get the benefit of EO, which does the same thing Precise Technique does. It's just a matter of uptime. It's very easy to get uptime on EO. It's slightly worse uptime, but it's for the skill I was using, Lancy Steel Sprain, it's basically 100% uptime very easily. It's not a problem at all. But that's the idea. EO and Precise Technique, both 40% more multipliers, but the difference is you get point blank versus no point blank. And then I get access to really good ES wheels, like this wheel here, and I get access to this good spell block wheel. I get access to Zealot's Oath. So I get upsides in terms of ES scaling and spell block. He didn't go spell block. I don't know if he even went Tempest Shield. I'm not sure. I can't remember what all his POB was, but that's the changes. You get to go basically right side tree is better damage. Left side tree has some advantage defensively in terms of methods you can go for sustain and spell block. That's my reasoning there. I also combine this with a shield with recover ES on block, which basically makes me shotgun immune for the most part in most mechanics. A lot of the deaths we saw, basically Jungron's first death and Ben's first death, were both shotgun deaths. If they had spell block and recover on block, I think there's a good chance that both of them might have survived their deaths. And that was part of my reasoning. When I saw those deaths, I was like, okay, I was thinking I wanted to go recover on block. I definitely want to go recover on block. A lot of people were telling me, Lance, go synth your shield. Why haven't you synthed your shield? And the reasoning was, if you synth your shield, you can't get a Crusader, Shaper, spell block, or ES on block mod. Technically, you could synth your way into an ES on block, but that's like super RNG and just very unlikely to happen. We're not going to have Vivid Vultures as it's a 10-day SSF event. So the only reasonable way to get it is doing something like this. I Awaken Orb, Shaper with Crusader. After I crafted my prefixes, I did a previous game change, Reforged Defense. It's about a 1 in 7 for me to hit recover on block because there's about 6k weight of faster start of recharge and 1k weight of recover on block, and that's what we have here. All right. Also going into that, we have about 45 spell block, and that means about half of all spells don't deal damage. That is a nice additional layer of defenses because most of the stuff that deals damage in Ubers it's a bunch of spells. Honestly, Ubers are spells. There's spells pretty much everywhere. The only non-spell things that are dangerous in Ubers is Shaper Slam and Eater Tentacles, but you can actually, those are actually available. Like for the most part, it's a bunch of spells. So spell block plus spell suppress. You want to lean heavy into that spell mitigation because Ubers, most of the things that they do that is deadly are spells. All right, after all of that, another comparison we have here is he went for minimum endurance bench crafts. I went for enduring composure. The upside here is he always has 3 endurance charges. It's consistent. It's always going to be there. Fantastic. The downside is your Immortal Call can't spend endurance charges, and I think this is a very, very big downside. Now, granted, I died because I couldn't cast Immortal Call. I'm still tilted at myself for it. But Immortal Call, if you look at it, has a very, very powerful line, which says 15% less physical damage taken per endurance charge removed. I'm pretty sure that line is additive with the other line where it says 35% less. So I think if I have 4 endurance charges removed, it might be 95% DR for Fizz. It could be just a bunch of separate 15% DRs. I don't know 100%. Point is, it's a ton of physical damage reduction. And my Immortal Call, if I have endurance charges, which you'll see I have very consistent ways to generate this. I self-hit myself with Forbidden Right, which guarantees consistent uptime on this. If you look at my Immortal Call, it has a 2.68 second duration where it lasts that long, and that's a huge window where Fizz damage just is nothing to the character. And we'll show the case this in an Uber Elder fight just to give you an example of what it looks like. So that's the biggest reason I would rather go for Enduring Composure, and I don't consider these options even close personally. The idea is when you proc Immortal Call, you are generating endurance charges because you proc it because you're about to get hit. You proc it, you get hit, and you're generating your endurance charges. By the time the Immortal Call is ending, you're generating your 3rd endurance charge and then your 4th, and you can go up to more endurance charges if you spec more on the tree. Whereas for minimum endurance charges, you need a large amount of suffix investment because you have to benchcraft on all your gear. Granted, if you're in softcore trade and you can do like Reflected Mist, then there's some other scenarios where you can just have like 6 minimum endurance charges from 2 rings from Reflecting Mist, stuff like that. But as for the SSF event, that is why the main reason I was thinking about it. So Enduring Composure Reasoning, Giga DR, Immortal Call, and I can grab max charges on the tree without needing more bench crafts. The other thing there is opportunity cost for this one was it cost me a jewel socket and 2 passives. So what it cost me in terms of gear investment is right here. I had to sacrifice this, whereas Ben had to sacrifice minimum endurance charge on his amulet and his 2 rings, something like that. Okay. Outside of that, the last big thing I had a question about, because people were wondering why were you doing this versus that, Molten Strike versus Lancy Seal Sprain. Molten Strike is just better damage. The problem is you have to be right next to the enemy to do damage, and there's a lot of mechanics that deny places you can stand. Syrian XR Greats, Cirrus Ground Degens, different degens in Uber Elder or Shaper or even Maven. There's a lot of things that block your ability to stand next to the enemy. I didn't think I would play well mechanically enough to be that close to the boss, and I thought Lancy Seal Sprain, this is something that I can kind of turn off my brain, be far away, and still deal the damage from wherever I can. That is a safe location to stand. It's lower damage, but it's consistent damage, and damage uptime starts making up some of that difference in damage. That is the reasoning. Molten Strike, much better DPS, but you have to be in melee range, and that's why I chose Lancy Seal Sprain. All right. So this is the primary differences between the characters that people had questions about. I just wanted to explain those. Now let's get into Trickster as an overall. How does Trickster defenses work? How does the character work in general? It's the same thing. If you ever see a Trickster, it's you should be doing this all the time. It is Evasion ES chess piece. This scales with Escape Artist, and then you get to grab behind Escape Artist. You get to grab this node right here, Spellbreaker. Most of the things that do damage in Ubers are spells. And prevent 10% additional spell damage is a very big damage reduction. So these two things are often a very common combination you do in Trickster. Outside of that, there's a little bit more nuance. You can go full DPS and go things like Polymath plus Soul Drinker. You can go one step ahead for guaranteed feels good situations. Whatever it is, you can make up your own mind what you end up liking a lot. But typically, it's Escape Artist into an Evasion Energy Shield chest piece, and then stacking Energy Shield gear on every other slot. Getting a little bit of Fizz taken as chaos on both your chest piece and your helmet. That's for Fizz DR. And then you combine that with Ghost Dance, High Evasion, maybe some Overleech. Maybe you do Wicked Ward if you're doing the recharge node. Or you can even do stuff like Zealot's Oath for sustain. Now let's get into the big elephant in the room of what are you doing in terms of clusters. This should pretty much always be the same with Ephemeral Edge, which is you want Veteran Defender plus Feed the Fury. These two nodes are giga powerful nodes. And you get them by you can do Reforge Speeds on cluster, Reforge Attack, you can do Alk Scours. Ideally, if you have a cluster that is level 50 to 67, it becomes very easy to hit these two notables together, and you can literally hit it within like 50 Alk and Scours pretty easily. If it's 68 or above, it gets a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder to hit. You can do Serrated Fossil, stuff like that. But anyways, these sorts of clusters are your bread and butter. 15 speed, 30 damage, fantastic. 15 all attribute, 15 all res, and another 240 ES from like a 400 ES shield. Very consistent nodes. And you want to do probably 2 or 3 clusters depending on where your tree is, how to set up. And then follow that up with basically ES nodes, int on your gear, and then max res if you can get it. The idea was, and if you have Balbal, you have permanent max res here. Then if you have a few jewels with max res on them, you can change the res based on the fight you're going to do. For example, Eater is a bunch of lightning damage, make your max res lightning. Exarch's a bunch of fire damage, make your max res fire. Uber Elder is a bunch of cold damage, make your max res cold. So you can swap the res on your jewels freely whenever you want. And I'll showcase that real quick. You can even use this to divine the rolls. So for example, here you'll see we have max cold, and I could go and I could say cold to fire. Let's use as an example. I can go cold to fire. You'll see how I swap that. Boom. 2 max fire res, and I can swap it back. Doom. 2 max res. 1 max res. Okay, so you know, hey, I have a bad roll and I need to re-roll it. And then you can do that. Stuff like that. It's just a way of swapping it in every fight to have your res be 90 for the fight it matters in. Okay, so that's the idea of the character. That's how it all played out. My big mistake, and the thing that I'm pretty sure would have solved it, is if I gave up these 3 points here. These 3 points I'm addicted to. What ended up happening is this node right here is I look at it as DC protection. This node, while mapping, is god tier. It is something that stacks all the physical damage hits you take. It stacks up and gives you recovery. It's something where if you go AFK in the middle of a bunch of monsters, this thing will sustain you by itself. The thing is, in Ubers, you don't need it. There's not that many quick physical hits that happen. So realistically, I didn't need this node. And the thing that I had a problem with was mana, and I could have solved it with these small changes. I could have grabbed these 2 nodes. I could have grabbed Reservation Efficiency, which would have made my max pool a lot higher. You'll see I go all the way up from 313 from what was 139. So it almost triples my total pool I have to work with, which means when I leech to full, I can attack a lot more times before I need to hit the enemy to leech again. So the likelihood I get low enough where I can't cast a skill is much lower. On top of that, I have a focus skill. And the reasoning for that is I dropped an anathema ring. I was going to do another ES evasion mastery here, and I was going to go double energy shield evasion rings because it's very good ES scaling. But since I dropped the anathema, I decided that was worth it for the DPS scaling of 2 additional damage curses. But the problem is it gives you a very expensive mana cost. Because when you cast 2 curses kind of cost a lot of mana. And what that means when I press this button, you see I focus here, and it uses like 80 mana. So I would use like 80 mana for my double curse. I would cast my skills a couple times. If I missed a couple times, I would be all of a sudden out of mana and out of room to work with it. So that is a bit of the risk here, because our setup here is Inspiration, Forbidden Rite, and then our 2 curses. Now, the big thing that would have saved me, these 3 nodes, the way this works out is I grab these 3 nodes, which means my mana regen goes up significantly. So if you see our base mana regen, where is that at? Blind mana regen 40 versus, let's do a little comparison here, versus 27. So it's about 60% more mana regen. So the likelihood that I can cast my Immortal Call goes up significantly just because my mana regen will get me to the amount I need for Immortal Call, which is roughly 46 mana. It gives me a little bit more time to generate that. And then number 2, and the biggest change I should have done, is I should not be running damage on full life. This does 34% more damage. Inspiration does 25. And I could take my Lancing Seal Sprain from 39 mana cost down to 22. The big thing this would mean is I sustain without my leech. And my mana doesn't go down. And I won't have the issue where I spend myself out of mana and I don't have the Immortal Call. So big regrets here, because I had these nodes I didn't need when I could have had these nodes. I don't even lose that much ES because this node comes with int on it. So for example, right here, you'll see we go 999 versus 96, which is only about a 300 ES loss, but guaranteed I will always be able to push my Immortal Call. That would have been the lifesaver, and man, that regret's going to eat me up for a bit. Now I'm going to showcase some Uber Elder here. The Gauntlet mods were hasted, DR, 4 extra proj, and what else was it? 100% increased damage. So the physical slams hit twice as hard. So I'm going to showcase some slams here just to give you guys a look at what Immortal Call does, because I keep talking about it like it's this great thing. But it was my cheat code for getting through this fight, and I misplayed my cheat code because I didn't have the mana. So I need to phase them through the first phase here because they don't have... Shaper doesn't start doing his slams until the second phase. He just kind of does like this sort of stuff where he just sits here. I couldn't sustain this beam, I don't believe, or I didn't actually test it. But with the extra 100% increased damage, I don't think I sustained the beam. But I can fully face tank all of these other mechanics they're doing with 100% increased damage. It's not a problem. The only problem is the beam. I have some good leech, but I do need to dodge that beam when it happens. I can sustain standing on the ground, but if I sustain standing on the ground, then I'm more relying on like my block, recover, my ghost dance, stuff like that, and a bit of my regen to sustain it. All right, so let's get these guys to the second phase real quick, and then I can showcase some slams and why it was the only dangerous mechanic in that fight. And man, I can't wait to forget about this because it's gonna eat me alive. I was so close to Ubers. For whatever reason, I decided to do one of the 2 Ubers that could actually even have a chance at killing me first. But I don't know why I did that. I'm really regretting it. I wanted to make the softcore enjoyers proud by doing well in the Gauntlet. I think we did okay. We got all the way to the Feared. I really wanted to clear some Ubers for my softcore homies. All right, so let's finish this up, and then I'll showcase some slams. We can get him Elder or get Shaper to start doing some slams on us. I'm going to showcase basically the difference in what it looks like with and without Immortal Call. But it should be a very apparent difference, to say the least. I'll wait for him to do a slam for us here. I'll showcase with Immortal Call first, and then I'll showcase without. And I'll do a couple of those just to give you an idea. He's gonna do it any second now. Gonna do it any second now. I think he could start doing it in this phase. Granted, when he was hasted, he did it like a lot faster. But he has like a cooldown to the ability. Okay, are you gonna, maybe I need to phase him one more time. I might need to phase him one more time. I'm not, I thought it was just the first phase, but maybe it needs to be. Oh, there we go. Immortal Call. So you'll see how much damage that did to us. It did like, I don't know, 2k ES or whatever it was. With 100% damage, that'd be 4k ES. I don't have any raw armor, so the extra fizz damage he hits me with doesn't change how much that hurts. Immortal Call while moving, about 1k ES. Hopefully I'm showcasing what I'm talking about here with Immortal Call DR. There is no world where that mechanic ever can kill my character if I press Immortal Call. There's just way too much DR on the skill for that to be a problem, and that's now no Immortal Call. Look at the difference. He did about half my ES there with 100% increased damage. Boom, all of a sudden we're getting one shot. So you can see the difference it makes. Immortal Call, high roll, crit, whatever it is, no world where he kills us. Don't Immortal Call, we die. That one, I think he missed or something. I don't know why that didn't do much damage. I didn't Immortal Call there, but maybe it was just because I was staying still or whatever. I'm not too sure. Anyways, man, I'm super mad at myself because we had everything set up where we could make it go for gold in terms of trying to finish the fear, or not the all the Ubers, and I threw it on this fight. I was coming off basically, I think 12 hours straight, and I wasn't thinking straight, and that first time I got hit where I couldn't cast Immortal Call, I should have said, wait a minute, maybe there's something I need to fix, but no, I just wasn't thinking it through, and it is what it is. Right when I went to press Immortal Call, our mana was down. I rewatched the clip. There was a split second where I could have casted Immortal Call, but I didn't have it in my brain to like spam it. I should have been like slamming the keys, but I wasn't really thinking it through that much. So anyways, this was my Gauntlet run. I'm gonna try to do better next time. So we got all the way to Feared. Next time Ziz hosts the Gauntlet, I'm gonna try to take it to Ubers. I did want to do like some update videos on my progress on this character, but there was just so much grind that needed to be done in order for me to be Gauntlet ready, and I just didn't really find the time to make the update videos. So I apologize to you guys for that, not giving you guys updated progress videos about how I was doing with things, how I was farming the gear, etc. But yeah, this was the character, and yeah, man, am I gonna be beating myself up about dying to something I should have never died to. But yeah, TLDR is the big lesson of the day. Don't mismanage your mana. If there's a skill you need to cast in order to survive a fight, you need to know for sure there's no world where you run out of your mana and you brick it. And so that's the big thing I learned going through this. Hopefully you guys enjoy this little video on the Gauntlet Trickster and what we did, or enjoyed the streams where we were streaming it. Yeah, anyways, that was the run. That's how far we got. And as always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out.